Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to course ENG 455. I'm Dr. Ansa Hamid, your course instructor for this program of linguistics. I am presently teaching at International Islamic University as assistant professor, and right now I welcome you all over here at the main campus or virtual campus. My course that is linguistics. The linguistics is quite a recent discipline, a new discipline in Pakistan, though, and at the same time it's not a very much popular discipline in Pakistan. So there are a lot of misconceptions regarding this new discipline. So I would like to start with what linguistics is, to give you a broad familiarity with this course known as linguistics. I would like to start from certain misconceptions quoted from Crystal book What Linguistics Is, page number 1. He started with a joke. What is your profession? I'm a teacher. What do you teach? I teach linguistics. Oh, it means you can speak a lot of languages. Well, I'm sorry, I can't actually. So there are a lot of misconceptions regarding this subject of discipline. Linguistics is not teaching of or knowing about a particular language or number of languages. It's beyond that. Do you know what linguistics is? Do you have certain guesses? Yes, with the linguistics, the right words that come into our mind quickly are, it is something about languages. It is something maybe about teaching a language, maybe about learning a language, but it's different. Linguistics is study of languages, no doubt about that. But at the same time, it is quite different from the previous disciplines that were already there before 1950s regarding the study of language or languages. So I would like to start with Crystal book What is Linguistics. My lecture would be primarily based on his book What is Linguistics, publication 1979. So to start with, what linguistics is better to know what linguistics is not. So I would like to start from the very first misconception about what linguistics is not. Yes, number 1, linguistics is not philology. Philology is a quite old subject regarding the study of language, rather more concerned about the history of languages. Yes, philology is a subject in which you study the history of languages over a time, how languages they evolved, how they changed over a period of time. For example, what kind of language was being used in Shakespeare time and what kind of language we use right now. So how language from Shakespeare age till today has been changed. The study over such period of time from Shakespearean age till today is known as philology, but it's not linguistics. Linguistics, yes, it studies language, but it studies language at a particular point of history. To put it in more concise words, we can say that philology has a diachronic approach towards the history study, whereas the linguistics, it has a synchronic approach. So what is the difference between this synchronic and diachronic approach? Diachronic approach is when you study certain thing over a period of time and you compare it from point to point. Whereas in synchronic approach, you study certain thing at a particular point of time. regardless of how it has been changed so far or what shape it will take in future. It is just concerned about the thing at a particular period of time. So linguistic with a synchronic approach would be interested in knowing what kind of language was there during the Shakespearean age, or what kind of language is being used by the writers now at the present age, without having any concern that how language has been changed during that point of time till today. So this way linguistics differs from philology. Philology, because it is argumented that linguistics or the study of languages is not a new discipline. Languages have been studied by Aristotle, his companions, and then many other philosophers and the anthropologists and different people, different critics, different educationists. They studied language. So the study of languages is not a new thing. But what is new is the discipline of linguistics. Philology, yes, it was existing since many centuries. From Aristotle time, people were interested about the history of languages. But in linguistics, it is a quite recent discipline which evolved around 1950s. So with different points, we will see how linguistics is different from all other older pre-existing branches of knowledge which were studying languages, but they are different from linguistics. Our first point was linguistics is not philology, or you can put in more precise word, linguistics is also not a comparative philology. Comparative philology, yes, where we compare the history of languages, how evolution process of one language is different from the other language, or was different from the other language. But linguistics is not concerned about all these histories of languages with diachronic approach. Next, linguistics is not about language teaching or learning. Yes, this is another misconception about the discipline of linguistics. As I put in the beginning, that when you tell people that you teach linguistics or you are going to learn linguistics, the right first idea that come into their mind is that you are going to study some new language, or maybe you are going to teach certain new language or languages. But no, linguistics is quite different discipline from ELT. ELT, English Language Teaching. Yes, I will put it in words that by learning linguistics or by having the knowledge of linguistics, you become a better learner of language. Yes, you become a better teacher of language, because linguistics gives you a lot of knowledge about the field of languages, how they work, how they function, what kind of structure they have. So in this way, you get better knowledge about the forms and structures and functions of the language. So in the other way, it can help you to learn a language in a better way. It can help you to teach a language or languages in a better way. But it very much as a separate discipline, linguistics is quite different from the subject of English language teaching. Now, what is the third misconception? Linguistics is not concerned with evaluation of a language in use. Yes, according to linguistics, this is the job of critics to evaluate a language. What kind of language were the writers of Shakespearean age were using, or what kind of language is being used by the writers of nowadays. Yes, it is not the job of linguist. Rather, it is beyond the scope of linguistics to evaluate a language, to check the quality of a language, to check whether our writer is using or was using good or bad language. it is mean all about subjectivity, whereas linguistics as a discipline of social sciences is purely objective. It does not permit you to check the language validity or its reliability or its worthiness according to your standards. It has no standards for evaluation of a language. Rather, it is a discipline of literary criticism rather than linguistics. So, next time when you are talking about this discipline of linguistics, you should be very careful how to differentiate your discipline from others' disciplines. The next point is, linguistics is not concerned with traditional grammar approaches. Yes, this is the biggest ground where linguistics is totally different from all other branches of knowledge which was studying language or grammar at before 1950s. Traditional grammarians, yes, they were already there. Again, to put it, that study of language or languages is not a recent thing. What is recent is the discipline of linguistics. Traditional grammarians, they were already there. They were already there to describe language, to study language in number of ways. But when this linguistics emerged, it was quite in contrast with so many established facts and the beliefs of traditional grammarian. So now we will move towards this point, that how this linguistics is different from all other traditional grammarian approaches. I would like to start from the very first point. Yes, speech versus writing. As you can see, that this is the first ground where modern linguistics it is in complete contrast with what traditional grammarians believe. Before 1950s, it was a common belief that language exists only and only in one form, and that is language. No distinction between speech and writing. Whereas when modern linguistics emerged, it completely differentiated speech and writing as two different modes of language. So this is quite different approach of modern linguistics. Traditional grammarians, their common belief was that because speech and writing, they are the single form, they have no much difference. Rather, talking about speech or writing is just talking about language. So what they did, they made a big mistake while using the same rules for two different modes of communication. And they tend to use the rules of one for the other, and that created a lot of problems. Whereas the modern linguistics, it emerged with a belief that speech and writing, they are two different modes. Yes, they are part of language. If I put it in Saussure words, he called it as langue and parole. Yes, knowledge about language and knowledge about use of language. But again, it was different for two different forms of communication, speech and writing. And modern linguistics, they came up with lot of points that, for example, they proposed that how speech and writing, they can be the same, because sometimes we only speak, we do not write, and sometimes we speak before we write. And it is also an established fact that some languages of the world, they were present only in spoken forms. So to neglect speech meant to neglect that languages of the world which were never written, but they only existed in the spoken form. So this is the one of the grounds where modern linguistics, they are against this notion of traditional grammarians. Actually, modern linguistics, they come up with the idea that speech is superior form of writing. Speech is primary means of communication than the writing. Then there was another fact that they put forward, that sometimes it happens that we have a form of language, but when we use it as in verbal form or in written form, then we use it quite differently. Take example of making plurals. Yes, B-O-A-T, boat, and T-R-A-I-N, train. Now if I want to make the plural, in writing form, the plural will take only an S, B-O-A-T-S, and T-R-A-I-N-S. So that's a plural. But in verbal form, when I will speak these two plurals, the pronunciation would be different. For the boat, the plural would be boats with the sa ending sound. But for the train, the ending sound would be z, trains. Not trains, rather trains. So this way you can see that speech is a different mode of communication than the writing. Let's take another example. If I am going to write a letter to my boss or a letter to an editor of a newspaper, the written form, it takes the full forms of language. I will drive a new car tomorrow. But when I will be providing the same information to my student or to my friend in verbal form, then the way I would say it, I'll buy a new car tomorrow, I will ride in a new car tomorrow, I'm going to buy grocery today. So you see, contraction. Yes, in speech contractions are allowed. Rather, in speech it is more convenient to use the contraction forms of words to make it more convenient and to develop to fluency in our speech. But when we will write the same things, then we are in formal, especially writing, in formal mode of writing, we are supposed to write the full forms. It is not considered good to use contractions while writing especially formal patterns. So this way we can see that speech and writing, they are two different forms of communication. The next point is where modern linguistics differs from traditional grammarians is that traditional grammarians were too much concerned with classical languages. Rather, they considered the classical languages as standard languages, as superior languages of the world, as languages more sophisticated, more logical, more complex, more nice forms of the languages. So with this notion in their mind, what they did, they tried to describe the other languages with reference to those classical languages. In this regard, influence of Latin is very much important. Because traditional grammarians, they considered that these classical languages like Greek, Roman, Latin, and especially Latin is far more superior than all other languages, or especially the languages which we are using today. Then they tried to describe other languages according to the standards of Latin and the classical languages. So this way they created a problem. because they were judging certain languages with respect to certain models provided by classical languages. On the other hand, modern linguistics, they were quite against this idea. According to them, there is no such idea of superior languages. Every language exists separately. So every language has a value, has a place different from other. So how we can describe one language against the yardsticks provided by the other? It appears to be quite illogical. Every language of the world, they have their own standards, they have their own logics, they have their own superior forms, they have their own aesthetic values. So it's quite inappropriate to describe one language with reference to another language. To give you an example, consider the example of cases and nouns. Latin has 6 cases for noun, whereas English has only 5 cases of noun. So how you are going to judge English with reference to Latin? This way it appears to be quite illogical. That's why the modern linguistics, they were against this idea of supremacy of certain languages, or idea of presenting some languages as superior models. The next point is also related to same conception, that is logical languages. Yes, again, because the traditional grammarians, they were of the view that certain classical languages, they have more superior forms, so they are more logical. On the other hand, for modern linguistics, this idea is again an absurd idea. How it is possible that you can distinguish certain languages of the world as more illogical, certain languages of the world as illogical, certain languages of the world as just logical? It's inappropriate to divide the languages into different categories on the basis of logical values, because every language has its own logics. And if no logics, rather there are certain irregular forms. According to modern linguistics, there is nothing like logical or illogical about language. Yes, there is unpredictable forms and there are irregular forms. Take the example of verbs. Go, went, gone. Why not? It is like show, showed, showed, the regular form of verb, but go, went, gone is an irregular form of verb. So it is the modern linguistic, actually they gave it a precise word like irregular, whereas the traditional grammarians, they would call it as illogical form. That go, went, gone is an illogical form, not an irregular. Whereas modern linguistics, they say that different languages of the world, they have certain forms which are unpredictable, and this irregularity is a feature common to all languages of the world. There are irregular verbs, there are irregular degrees of adjectives, there are certain irregular instances where you use languages in different ways. So this way, languages of the world, they can be unpredictable, they can be irregular, but there is no question about being logical or illogical. The next point is again complexity. Again, setting the traditional grammarians, setting the classical languages at standard forms and putting it that yes, these classical languages, they are the standard forms of languages. They are more superior than all other languages because they are complex. So complexity is a value on the basis of which you can judge a language. It means superiority or inferiority. According to modern linguistics, it is not possible. Languages are neither complex nor primitive. Every language has its own structure, has its own forms and has its own function. You cannot describe a language that yes, it is a complex. Yes, for a Pakistani student like me, Chinese is a complex language because I cannot Chinese language in a more proper way, the way I learn Urdu. But take the example of a Chinese student. If he or she is going to learn Urdu, he or she would find Urdu as difficult as we find Chinese. So this way, it is quite logical to say that languages are not complex. If they are complex, then why they are so easy to learn for their native speakers? And similarly, there are no concept of primitive languages as well. No languages of the world are simple as well. Because if there are certain languages which are spoken in far away tribes in West Africa or some tribes of Africa, so we can't say yes, those languages are very much primitive or they are very much simple because they have only few structures and only few usages. No, we cannot judge language as complex or as primitive. All languages, they have their own forms, they have their own beauty standards, they have their own usage standards. So this is another ground where the modern linguistics is quite different from the traditional grammarians. Next point is again related to this concept of classical languages. Because modern linguistics, it is against the idea that certain languages, or rather classical languages as put by traditional grammarians, are more standard forms of languages, so they have more higher static values than all other languages of the world. Whereas modern linguistics, it states that languages are neither beautiful nor ugly. Again, every language has its own standards for aesthetic sense or for beauty standards. How we can discriminate languages on the basis of the aesthetic value? For example, yes, as it is a common example that is provided, that yes, the English people, they have more color words than the Urdu speakers. We have only few shades, few colors, but in English we will find a lot of variety of shades for even a single color. In Urdu we have one word jamni, but in English we have lilac, we have plum, we have we have purple. So we have a lot of words, but it does not prove that our language, it has no aesthetic value, that Urdu has no aesthetic value. Rather, it depends more on the culture. According to the culture, there are additions and subtractions of certain ideas and beliefs are made. But it does not describe that, okay, on the basis of these things, we can describe one language as having more aesthetic value than the other. Yes, our next point is historical meanings of languages are correct. Yes, modern linguistics and traditional grammarians, again another clash. Actually, according to the traditional grammarians, because their standards are the classical languages, so they value the historical meanings of the words more than the recent ones, because they believe the good languages are those which do not change. Actually, they do not accept the change. So what they do, they accept the definitions which were for a word or for an idea which were existing in history, which were from where the words were taken. Let's take an example of the word nice. Today, if somebody says to you, you are looking nice, so we take it in very positive. Yes, it's a positive compliment, because for word nice, we have a positive connotation that is good. You are looking nice, it means you are looking good. Your dress is nice, it means your dress is good. So again, we have a very positive meaning for the word nice. But if we trace back its history, the word nice in Shakespeare age was equivalent to its meaning fastidious. Fastidious. If we trace back again its history to French origin, its meaning was silly. So with French origin, if somebody is saying you are looking nice, it has a negative meaning, means you are looking silly. And we still trace back its history towards its Latin origin, then this word has a meaning ignorant. Now what these traditional grammarians do, they accept the ignorant as a right meaning for this word nice. Whereas the modern linguistics, they believe in change. According to them, languages change, and change is something which is undistinguishable part of every living thing. So this way, the word nice has the right meaning which is accepted nowadays, which is the current one, not that ignorant. So this way, traditional grammarians, they consider the historical meanings as correct one, whereas the modern linguistics, they consider those meanings as vague, because they believe that when languages change, you need to accept that change. You need to accept the recent traditions or the recent meanings associated to a language. Then, next point, vague definitions. Yes, according to this point, traditional grammarians, what was their mistake? Actually, they tried to define everything. And when they tried to define these things in language, they tried to make it in their own words. And to put it in more clear words, they tried to make the rules of language, which was a big mistake according to the modern linguistics approach. For example, a traditional grammarian, they've tried to define the parts of speech. Yes, here I would like to add into your knowledge that unfortunately in Pakistan, from class primary level to onwards, we are still teaching and we are still learning these vague definitions which were provided by traditional grammarians. Yes, not getting it? Okay, what is a noun? Yes, define a noun. Yes, I know. You are going to say, a noun is a naming thing for a person, place, thing. Yes, a noun, naming word. The definition which was actually provided by the traditional grammarian. What is a verb? A verb is a doing word. What is a conjunction? A conjunction is a joining word. So these were actually the definitions which were provided by traditional grammarians. And the modern linguistics, they actually refused or they actually refuted these definitions on the grounds that these definitions actually do not provide or are unable to define these terms properly. If you want to define a certain aspect of a language or take an example of parts of speech, then a good definition is one which would take into account all the aspects related to that feature. For example, take example of noun. If I accept the traditional definition that noun is a naming word for a person, place, thing, then what about the word beauty? Can you categorize it? In which list you will put it? Nouns. Why? Beauty is not a noun, beauty is not a person, beauty is not a place, beauty is not a thing. Beauty is an abstract idea. Jealousy, democracy. What about these abstract ideas? The traditional definition, it does not take into account these abstract nouns. So the definition provided by traditional grammarian is not enough. Take another example. Verb, a doing word. So I'm sitting here. What about am? Can you categorize its, can you define its parts of speech? Yes, you will again put it in the category of verbs. But how? Am is not a doing word. Am is a verb, a linking verb. So what about the verbs all which are not doing anything? For example, the linking verbs and the helping verbs. So this traditional definition of the verbs, that is doing word, is not giving a proper definition of what actually verb is, because verb is just more than a single doing word. Verb is not only a sitting or watching or dancing or playing or moving. Verb is, am, are the verbs. They are the verbs. Can, shall, will, could, they are also the verbs, the modal auxiliary verbs. So actually these traditional definitions, they needed to be revised in order to capture all the aspects related to a certain term. So this way the modern linguistics, it is against the definitions provided by the traditional grammarians. So up till here you are quite clear that how the traditional grammarians and modern linguistics, they are quite different from each other. There are much more points than these, but these were the more solid points where you can differentiate between traditional grammar approaches and the modern linguistics. If I summarize it, I can say that traditional grammarians, they have a prescriptive approach. Prescription, just like a doctor writing a prescription. Similarly, the traditional grammarians, they are writing the rules of the language. They are defining the things of the language. So they are prescribing things. On the other hand, the modern linguistics, they have a descriptive approach. They believe that a linguist should describe things rather than making it. A language is already existing here in front of us, in front of a linguist. So we need to describe it. We are no one to define that what should be a noun inside a language, what should be a verb inside a language. Rather, these things are already there in language. We have to observe those things, and we need to describe language with reference to that particular things. So this way we can say that we should not make, as a linguist, we do not believe on making of rules. Rather, we believe on describing of the rules for a particular language. So this way, traditional grammarians, they are very much different from the modern linguistics. Here we have seen so far that how linguistics differs from all the traditional grammarians. Now, I hope you are quite clear with what linguistics is not. And if you know what linguistics is not, then you are able to define what linguistics is. Now we will move towards our next part, that what linguistics is. Again, David Crystal, what is linguistics? If we look at the etymology of the word linguistics, it has a Latin origin. It is made up of two words, as you can see, lingua and sticks. Lingua, tongue. Sticks, knowledge or science. So on the basis of these words, we can make a definition for linguistics is, so linguistics is scientific study of knowledge. The only mistake you made in the beginning was to give me a definition like linguistics is the study of knowledge. I've added one more word, scientific study of language, all languages. So there are two prominent words here in this definition, scientific and language. If I define this word scientific, it means systematic, because science is a discipline which is considered to be very much scientific and is very much concerned with experiments, and they have a proper experimental procedures. They actually do not make rules, they do not make theories, rather they establish theories on the basis of certain grounds they make certain tests, they make certain observations, and then they come up with a theory, or then they come up with a law. Similarly, linguistics is scientific because linguistics believes in scientific procedure for collection of data. You have to make observation, then you have to make a hypothesis, you have to conduct certain experiment in order to check that hypothesis, and if your hypothesis is correct, then you can make a theory or a rule or a law. So it is a complete chain of steps which is known as to be scientific procedure. And in linguistics, whatever is studied, whatever law or whatever rule or whatever things are established, they are based on the scientific procedure. They are very much systematic. So this way, that's why linguistics is part of social sciences discipline rather than humanities, because it has more concern with experimental procedures, with systematic things, with objectivity. Yes, keep this thing in mind, that objectivity is another feature for experimental procedure. So this way we can say that linguistics is a systematic discipline, it's a scientific discipline, it's an objective discipline where you gather knowledge about language, where you describe language on the basis of certain steps, or rather scientific steps. The next word in the definition was language. As we said, linguistics is scientific study of languages. So scientific and then language. What is language? Do you know what is language? Again, if I ask somebody, do you know what is language? Yes, I know what language is. Of course, I speak it all the time. Well, if I ask the same person, define it, then what the other person is going to say? Language. Language is something that I am speaking. Language is something that I speak all the time. Yes, accepted. Language is what we speak. But what is the exact definition of the language? Then an ordinary man has never proper words to define a language. If as a student, or if as a student of social sciences group or the literature or any other discipline, you have certain knowledge. So what you are going to say? Language is a tool of communication. Yes, accepted. Language is a tool of communication. Language is a set of rules that is adopted by a society. But there are certain definitions which are provided by some well-known names. So I would like to give you certain definitions of language. Here I should make it clear that I'm not going to tell you here that what language is. Inshallah, in our next lectures we will discuss in detail what language is, what is its nature, what kind of functions it has, what kind of usages, what kind of forms a language have. But right here I'm just going to introduce you with the concept with what language is. To start with, Sapir 1921, he defined language as, language is a primarily human. Definitely it is a human. Definitely or not definitely, we need to discuss it. And inshallah, in next lecture we are going to debate on this thing. Language is human, purely human, or it is also mean a legacy of certain other species in this world. So this is reserved for my next lecture. So what I am going to discuss over here, Sapir definition of language. Language is a primarily human and non-instinctive method of communicating ideas, emotions and desires by means of a system voluntarily produced symbols. voluntarily produced symbols. I am stressing on these words because when we want to speak certain words, we do it. This is a voluntarily action. Then our language is comprised of certain symbols. It is actually a set of symbols which we put together, makes certain symbols and then produce certain words, makes certain words, produce certain phrases, makes phrases, come up with clauses, makes clauses, come up with sentences. So this way, language is quite complicated thing. But in the deep roots, it is a set of symbols. And what their symbols are, inshallah, we will discuss in phonetics. Next definition is by Henry Sweet, 1993. Language may be defined as an expression of thought by means of speech, sounds. We utter certain sounds, and then by uttering those sounds, actually what is the purpose is that we want to express ourselves. We have certain ideas in our mind, we have certain thoughts in our mind, and in order to express them, we use language as a tool. Again, language is a tool of communication, but comprised of certain symbols. It's a volunteer action, and so many things are associated with it. Another definition, Encyclopedia Britannica. Language is a system of conventional spoken or written symbols by means of which human beings, as members of social group and participants in its culture, communicate. Again, the same thing. Communication is actually the sole purpose of this language, because we speak when we want to say something. We speak when we want to express ourselves. We speak when we want to communicate ourselves. So this way, it is an act of communication. But again, there are so many controversies regarding the definitions of language and that what language is, what kind of nature it has. But inshallah, we are going to deal with them in our next lectures. So now, again, my focus is back on linguistics. We have so far studied what linguistics is and what linguistics is not. But now, again, I am moving towards the scope of linguistics, because though the linguistics is quite a recent branch of knowledge, a recent discipline, which was introduced around in 1950s, but again, it has widened its boundaries, and so many sub-branches of linguistics are found nowadays. When you are concerned about linguistics, if you ask somebody having an authority on linguistics, he would ask you that in which branch of linguistics you are interested. Psycholinguistics, sociolinguistics, applied linguistics, historical linguistics, anthropological linguistics. So actually, inside the discipline of linguistics, there are many branches. And I would like to start with descriptive linguistics. Many linguists call it purely linguists, because descriptive linguistics is purely concerned with study of languages. As the name makes it clear, descriptive. So it means it is about the description. Describing a language is the scope of descriptive linguistics. But at the same time, when it deals or it studies certain language, it has three questions. What exactly do we know when we know a language? Number two, how is this knowledge acquired? How this language is acquired. This is all about language acquisition. If I have acquired Punjabi as my mother tongue, or Urdu as my national language, or English as my as international language, as a lingua franca, as a source for getting education, then how I have acquired these languages? And third question, how is such knowledge used? How this knowledge about the languages For example, about the form of language, about the structure of language, about the functions of language, how we are going to use this language. So the descriptive linguistics is concerned about all these things, about the language, about the nature of language, about the different levels of language. Inside them you can also have certain categories like phonetics, phonology, morphology, semantics, syntax, because they are all about the language. They are all the features associated with language. So inside descriptive linguistics or purely general linguistics, we are concerned about these theoretical things, theoretical observations and data. Next, historical linguistics. As the name makes it clear, historical linguistics is concerned with the study of history of languages. How they have languages, they change, they develop in course of time. The ways in which languages change from period to period and the causes behind this change. And not only the causes, but actually what are the results. You can say what are the causes and what are the effects of language change. What kind of language was there at a particular period of time and how it changed from that particular period of time to another period of time. What were the causes behind it? What are the effects of this change? And what is going to happen as a result of this change? These are all in the scope of historical linguistics. After the historical linguistics, our next discipline inside the linguistics is comparative linguistics. Comparative linguistics, it deals with distinctions among languages, how one language differs from another language. I would like to make it clear over here that in beginning, when I was making it clear that how modern linguistics is very much different from traditional grammarians, I said that modern linguistics, they are not at all concerned with the type of languages, but that by the type of languages mean by the standards of languages. If they are going to compare languages, they are not going to compare it on the basis of certain standards. On the basis of comparison, they are not going to establish, okay, this language is good and this language is bad, this language is complex and this language is primitive, this language is logical and this language is illogical. No, this is not the concern of modern linguistics. Actually, they are just concerned about the differences among languages, neither less nor more. They are not going to evaluate languages on the basis of their distinction. Rather, they are just comparing languages. And this comparison is once again with a synchronic approach rather than a diachronic approach. Psycholinguistics. Another very interested area inside the linguistics. Psychology and linguistics combined together and emerged as psycholinguistics. Actually, this knowledge, this discipline emerged on the grounds that language is basically a mental phenomenon. If you know about the link of language and the certain parts of brain which are held responsible, actually again controversial, that there are certain organs in our brain which are responsible for producing language. So on the basis of this thing, because language is a mental phenomena, the psychology is very much interested in studying languages. And when psychology is combined with linguistics, together a new discipline emerges, that is psycholinguistics. Psycholinguistics is very much concerned with the production, acquisition and learning of languages, how we learn languages, how we acquire languages, what kind of mental processes are happening in our mind when we learn a language, when we acquire a language, when we produce language, when we listen to a language. All these is in the scope of psycholinguistics. It also deals with the psychological factors like motivation, anxiety, stress with reference to language. For example, if a learner is motivated in a positive way to learn a language, whether or not he or she is going to learn that language in a better way. So if I am under stress, what would happen, what would be there, what would happen to my language performance? Would be there any difference? So the psycholinguistics, it deals with these questions. Next is sociolinguistics. Socio, word from society. So linguistics, if we study language in relation with the society, then this discipline of linguistics is known as sociolinguistics. Actually, this is a very popular branch of linguistics which deals with the study relationship between a language and society. It particularly studies variations in language with reference to social, geographical, ethnical and functional variables. For example, what kind of variations are there in language from place to place? Take the example from your own society. Punjabi is a language, but inside Punjabi we have a lot of variation. We have Seraiki, we have a Lahori Punjabi, we have a Faisalabadi Punjabi, we have a Potwari Punjabi. They are all about Punjabi, but they are the variations of Punjabi languages. In sociolinguistics, we are interested to study that how these variations they happen. They are mean different as well as the variations of a same language. Similarly, studying the variations of language between male and female groups, between two ethnic groups, between two societies, between two functions. For example, how a doctor is going to use a language and how a nurse is going to use a language, or how a teacher is going to use a language, or how a shopkeeper is going to use a language. You know, this is very common to observe that every person belonging to a certain profession has its own vocabulary, a certain specific vocabulary that is known as jargon. So the field of sociolinguistics is interested about all these things, about language and its relationship with society. Next branch of linguistics is anthropological linguistics. Anthropology, if you know about this discipline, anthropology is actually the study of cultures. It is again, you can say that it is a sub-branch of sociolinguistics because it is again related to society, the culture of a society. But if we particularly relate culture with a language and then study this relationship, this happens in the field of anthropological linguistics. They study that how different cultures, they have different languages, what is a relationship between a language and a culture, how they are essential for each other, whether or not language it identifies a culture or culture is identified through a language. So all these questions, they are answered by anthropological linguistics. The next branch is ethnolinguistics. Ethnolinguistics, again a sub-branch of sociolinguistics, based on a term known as ethnicity. It studies the variations in language on the basis of social interaction among a few human races and cultures, on the basis of racism and culture and languages and so many factors. When we define certain ethnic groups and then when we study their languages, then such study is included in the discipline of ethnolinguistics. Applied linguistics. Applied linguistics, as the name makes it clear, application. whatever theories are there in linguistics, whatever rules are there in linguistics, when they are applied to other fields of knowledge, they come into the category of applied linguistics. For example, if I am going to use the language acquisition or language learning theory from descriptive or general linguistics on ELT grounds, how I am going to use a language acquisition theory to make it clear how a child learns a language, how a child can become a better learner of a language, then I am connecting the general linguistics with ELT. And when I am connecting theory of general linguistics or descriptive linguistics to another discipline of knowledge, then this is known as applied linguistics, where we connect the discipline of linguistics with other disciplines of knowledge. It applies linguistics theories on other areas of knowledge rather than producing new theories. The concern of applied linguistics is not to produce new theories or to test theories or to make theories or to describe language. Rather, what it does, it only takes the theories from one field of knowledge and it applies, it comes up with its application, with its applicability. That's why this is known as applied linguistics. So to conclude, I would like to say that the knowledge of linguistics is interdisciplinary. Leaving the general linguistics or descriptive historical linguistics, all other branches of linguistics, they are somehow related with other disciplines, they are linked with other areas of knowledge, with other fields of knowledge, thus making linguistics as interdisciplinary in its nature. You can see from the figure that linguistics is concerned and linked with so many other branches of knowledge. That's why nowadays linguistics is given very much value, because in almost in all the disciplines, people, they are very much concerned about the language as well. If I'm a student of TEFL, I must know the theories about language learning and language acquisition. If I am studying the culture of a particular society in ethnography, then I will be concerned about the language of that culture. So this way language is very much important, related to all other disciplines or related to all other fields of knowledge, and it is the area where linguistics is linked with other disciplines. If we recap or summarize our today's lecture, we have learned today that what linguistics is not, how traditional grammarians, they are different from modern linguistics, how speech and writing, they are the different two modes of communication, how traditional grammarians, they have certain standards and definitions and certain terminologies which are rather objected as well as posed by modern linguistics. Similarly, we have described in detail that what linguistics is, how it is a systematic study of languages, what the word scientific says about it, about its nature, what is a language, a brief introduction towards language, and then finally we studied the branches of linguistics. Inshallah, next time in our lecture we are going to start with what language is, or I will make it more clear that our beginning lectures would be based on descriptive linguistics, all about language, what language is, what its nature is, how human language is different from animals' language, what are the different functions of language, what are the different levels of language. These topics would be dealt in our next lectures. So see you soon. Take care. Allah Hafiz.